Good morning. My name is Philippe Huberdeau, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to this second workshop of this great initiative, Scale Up Europe, aiming at accelerating the rise of global tech champions in Europe. First of all, I would like to thank our partners. We have Roland Berger, and we are very glad to have Ashok Cole with us today, as well as the European Startup Network, French Tech, Station F, Viva Tech, Sifted, and last but not least, Hello Tomorrow, and with Christophe Talek, who will be moderating this workshop. I would, of course, also like to thank you all, to thank all the 150 members of Scale Up Europe, founders, investors, corporates, associations, and especially those attending the workshop today, of course. So why is that deep tech important for Europe? First of all, Europe has to fight for its place on the podium of breakthrough innovations of the future, and in that way also to achieve technological sovereignty. It has already taken some steps in the framework of the European Innovation Council, for instance. We established a 10 billion euro fund and programs such as Pathfinder, Transition, or Accelerator. But we are not there yet, and we still need to up our game to achieve technological sovereignty. And just to name a few, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotech are high on the agenda of our governments, and we are lucky today to have with us founders and CEOs that are leading the way in these areas. But without further ado, I will leave it to Christophe and wish you all a very fruitful workshop.
Thank you, Philippe, and a warm welcome to our Scale Up members and participants. I'm Chris from Hello Tomorrow, and as a global deep tech community, we're proud to be here together with you to facilitate this conversation that can only happen with us and your insights. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the partners in crime today for this conversation. If we can have the slide with the participants, our discussion today is going to be highlighted by our co-chairs, obviously, which I thank really again for joining us for this discussion. So Johanna Michielin is the CEO of CNRS Innovation, the valorization and tech transfer subsidiary of the French National Science Research Center. And Christian Angermayer is an entrepreneur, investor, founder of Apeiron investment group, which focuses, among other fields, in technology and life sciences. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Ashok Cole, Senior Partner of Digital Analytics at Roland Berger, my sidekick today to moderate this session and introduce a program before our co-chairs open today's conversation and before I introduce other speakers for our session. Maybe while we're waiting for Ashok to join on stage, that has a technical problem, I'm probably gonna introduce a bit like the topics that we have. So today we're gonna tackle one obvious one, turn scientific excellence into breakthrough tech and businesses. And as our European Commission President recently said, we're quite good at making science out of money, but not so much to make money out of science. So we'll tackle this first topic. There's lots to be said. We'll also tackle one key issue for the deep tech ecosystem, and probably more than other startups, because clearly the VC model that we experience in Europe will have to adapt to the deep tech investment, and the value chain needs to be coordinated for this tremendous opportunity. The European Commission recently announced like several instruments, as Philippe was saying, that will help leverage this private equity and reach, obviously, hopefully the potential we want for our European region. So we'll dig into some recommendations that the members already made on that part. That was a heated conversation, as you could guess. And finally, we'll address Europe's key challenge with the help of deep tech. We're confident, optimist, all ambitious around this table that deep tech is obviously a part of the solution if we want to tackle problems with new ways of thinking, new technologies, but also tremendous economic opportunities for region and sovereignty challenges if we want to stay in the course that is starting around the world on those topics. With this said, I'd like to move on to some forwards of the co-chairs, if they can be invited on stage. I guess we're still a technical problem with Ashok, so we're probably going to move on the next slide. Before my co-chairs are joining me, I will introduce some speakers with us today that are, as Philippe was saying, really emblematics of the technologies we want to develop tomorrow in the region and in the sovereign topics that we need to master within Europe. Maybe before I introduce the speakers, Christian and Johanna have joined me on stage. So would you care to introduce maybe the conversation we have today around the three topics just with your opening remarks? Johanna, if you want to start.
Yes, hi everybody, and really glad to participate to this workshop. I'm really glad to participate because I think we're addressing here very major topics for the upcoming years. For sure, this challenge to turn scientific excellence into breakthrough tech is a major challenge because of the issues we're now facing. Philippe mentioned the challenges of climate change, of the availability of natural resources, of the pandemics that we're facing as well. And I believe that the answer to those challenges is for sure inside science, and not only, and also inside our ability to turn this fundamental science into actual usable solutions to face those challenges. And so I completely agree as well with Philippe when he says that it is also a matter of sovereignty for Europe when we're addressing who will master those solutions, how will they be used, are we going to have our hands on those solutions? And just to maybe give you a concrete example of those challenges. When I remember the president talked specifically about our ability to master data storage, for example, which is a huge challenge for humanity in the upcoming years. Well, data storage now we're addressing the problem of having a very secure and our own European cloud. Well, the next step in data storage might be through new technologies like, for example, DNA storage. And right now, this is scientific research. This is a breakthrough technology. The question that we need to ask ourselves in Europe is are we gonna have our sovereignty on long-term conservation of data through technologies such as DNA data storage, and what are our strengths in this area, and how do we make sure that the next big player in data storage is European. And so this is true for this particular example. It is also true with quantum computing for sure. It is true for a lot of scientific topics that are going to affect our lives in the upcoming years. And so I think, this is the core topic that we are trying to address with the deep tech, and I'm looking forward to have all your insights there.
Thanks a lot. Maybe Christian, a few words.
Cool. Yeah, my name is Christian. Very happy to be aboard. It's always good if you have a great pre-speaker, Johanna, because I just can say I completely underwrite what Johanna was saying. But I made 2 points. The one is sort of the not annoying, but like the anecdote this morning, because it's very great that we have that, because obviously that shows that politicians and head of states like President Macron are sort of seeing the necessity to support the startup ecosystem in general, in our case, the deep tech part. Yeah, but partly what we need all to work on that I think it's fashionable on the headline that we all agree is in Germany as well, of politicians now to say we're super startup friendly. But then when push comes to shove, like this morning, the German government completely messed up a very, very simple thing, like the employee stock option availability. So the whole startup scene pushed for it, and the outcome is completely bad. Yeah. So, and you're asking yourself, like, if politicians don't see that simple thing, that employees should be properly rewarded in an entrepreneurial fashion, yeah, how can we tackle the real big problems if we don't get employee stock option law right? It's just a little bit like, so there's a lot to be done, and we need to move from pure like political signaling and lip syncs, or how we say it, like stuff, like to sort of real support for startups. Yeah, because which leads me to my second point, which is like a little bit in other words, what Johanna was saying is that, I mean, my personal view on the world is that we're living, which I like personally very much, we're living in this world of exponential growth. Yeah, and I think we all have started understanding exponential growth when it comes to startups, because we see companies like Apple emerging from nothing, becoming a global market leader. Yeah, the tricky thing of exponential growth is, though, that normally it creates a winner takes it all a world, because you see it with Apple. Yeah, and I think what people underestimate is that the same applies actually for nations, or in our case for Europe as a region. Yeah, meaning in a world of exponential growth, if we as Europe are missing out for too long, and our, let's say, competitors in a startup term, the US and Asia, yeah, if they grow over a certain period, I mean economically, but also in terms of knowledge, in terms of technology, whatever, there might be a point where we as Europe then lost the game by good, as there is a point you wouldn't start a new phone company, mobile phone company. Apple won, yeah, and maybe Android, but like, yeah, but like maybe have two, yeah. But my fear is that because in old times, politicians were used to 20, 30 years ago, even if there was a lost decade or a lost some years, in a time of linear growth, you were always able to catch up again. Germany was very weak around 2000. Somehow we caught up. But I think they might underestimate, or politicians might underestimate, that we're now in a world where if we're not performing over a certain period of time, we might never be able to catch up again. So even more important, we need to get it right now. So that's just my point.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. With those introductory remarks, I'd like to also introduce some of our speakers today, members of the community Scale Up Europe. And the first one, Ivan Getz, is the co-founder and CEO of Apeiron Quantum Computers, which Finland has selected recently to build its first quantum computer and deliver a 50-qubit machine by 2024. I hope, Jan, you'll explain what qubit is to the crowd, because maybe not all of us are accustomed to the world of quantum. Our second speaker, Antoine Hubert, is the CEO of Insect, a world leader in natural insect protein and fertilizer production. Founded in 2011 in Paris, Insect is already a leader, and they transform insect in premium, high-value ingredients for pets, fish, and plants. And finally, Nigel Toon is the CEO of GraphCore, a very strong player in the AI microprocessor market, which in only 4 years raised more than $7 million, or should we say 590 million euros, to illustrate today on those key topics, how we could move faster and bolder on having scale-ups in Europe happen. So thanks for joining us today. And I'm going to introduce the first key topic to challenge our beliefs in what we already do. What should we do better to move forward on those topics? If we can go to the next slide. So our first topic is going to be obviously how to turn scientific excellence into breakthrough tech. Oh, sorry, before that, because we couldn't have everyone on board in the discussion like today on stage, but they're with us in the chat. Like here's a glimpse of our members on the deep tech track. Thanks again for joining. And all those members this last month have been invited to contribute through surveys, and next month after workshops, we'll refine what recommendation we provide for these initiatives to move forward. So as a first topic, the real question is, why must we unlock the power of deep tech, and how could we do it? We have few challenges. Obviously, one is to turn science excellence into entrepreneurship. 44% of French young researchers consider entrepreneurship as an option. And you should know that, let's say in Europe, 16% of the students only felt encouraged by their university to valorize their research and or create a startup in 2020. And for sure, if in France, like the deep tech plan has made things change, there's room for progress across Europe and inspiration among each other to move forward on this first point. A second important topic is to help raise awareness of the tech innovation in the corporate world. We're still seeing too many collaborations stop at the proof of concept stage, and we need to go further in this collaboration and strengthen the links within the corporate and the deep tech research or startup world to move faster, because they both represent part of the solution, like this more and more efficient transfer from university and research to market from the startups, and this incredible power of industrialization and commercialization that corporates embed. And finally, we need to increase investors' appetite for European deep tech. Obviously, we're still like, and it's a figure from this year, 4 times less in terms of this investment in European deep tech startups than in American ones. And recently at the European Innovation Council launch ceremony, some startups were reminding us that it's even 8 times in the field of healthcare. So there's room for improvement in this field as well. Roadblocks that we can probably remove together. So that's just to frame, let's say, the challenges for this first question. Let's move on the next slide, please, so we can dive into some of the recommendations that the members already made this month. One obvious consensus point is that we need to develop this entrepreneurship in curricula, dedicated classes, startup competition, entrepreneurship tracks, you name it. But I'd love still to hear your thoughts on this first consensus point. 2 points that are provoking debates are worth discussing further is one, to build connection between ecosystem even further, including entrepreneurs, VC profiles, in university bodies. There's lots of, let's say, hubs that are starting to be created around Europe, campuses, different models. So we'll have a chance to dig into such models today, because Europe has such strong specificities sometimes in region and such strengths, but there's also a challenge to have a, let's say, equally strong Europe across all regions of our across all states of regions. And the second one, discussion point, is probably to keep advertising successes and role models through trainings, are removing psychological barriers to inspire further our scientific community into developing breakthrough tech and businesses. And to open this conversation, I'd like Johanna maybe to take the mic first, then Christian, and then I will invite our three speakers that will have a chance to introduce themselves and comment on this question. Johanna, do you want to come back with me? Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think the points that are raised in this first discussion are actually major points, and I would say that maybe the one that is presented as a consensus, meaning developing entrepreneurship in curricula and through dedicated classes, is joining the one that is more about to be discussed, meaning advertising successes and role models. All of this is linked to the fact that we actually absolutely need the researchers on board. It is now very clear for all of us that you don't create a deep tech startup without the researchers that invented the technology that is going to be used by this startup. At least in the first years, because the first years of the startup are going to be about developing this technology, and so you're going to need to have the researchers on board. Most of them are not CEOs of this company, and that's not what we're looking for. But they're going to be involved in the development of this company. They can be involved for sure on the scientific development, being CSO or just part of a scientific advisory board. In any case, they are part of this entrepreneurship adventure, and so they need to get an entrepreneur mindset themselves, because they're going to interact with VCs, with clients, with other founders, and so they need to get this mindset themselves. It is not that easy, I would say. It is a change of a mindset for a researcher. So for sure we need trainings. But we especially, I think, need role models. We need some researchers to show that they did it and how interesting it was for them, for their career, for the satisfaction of seeing their science becoming a product and becoming available to humankind. And so in this part, for sure, Antoine, Jan, and Nigel, you will have much more to say, I would say, but you bear some kind of responsibility to the community to for sure tell your story, tell what was great in your adventure, what is great in your adventure, what is difficult, and then for sure we as research centers need to show and emphasize our support to our researchers who want to join those entrepreneurship projects. And this is something that is somehow of a cultural change. It started very well in France, I can say, but it needs to, it's going to, for sure going to take some time, but it needs to go further and further so that it is clear for every researcher that starts an academical career that it is absolutely normal and actually expected that part of its career is going to be taking part in a technological transfer project. Yeah, we still have some work on that, I would say.
It's a really good point. Christian, you went to biotech, with an original path. What's your point of view on this scientific excellence to be turned into breakthrough?
So the main point, it's actually what Johanna already mentioned in a sentence, is that training, meaning all of that what we have on the slide is super important, but just certain parts, I think, in entrepreneurial life can be trained. And a big part is, meaning I think there are certain types of entrepreneurs and certain not. I think that's meaning not everybody needs to become an entrepreneur. But also it's sort of a cultural thing. So if you look at, again, if I look at our competitors as a nation or as an area like the US, they do have the entrepreneurship culture literally ingrained in their society. Yeah, a simple, catchy, simplified thing is, but they know how to present themselves. And I'm always sitting there painfully and think we have so amazing scientists, and then they start presenting themselves and selling themselves, and you're like, holy shit, this is not gonna go. And how shall I ever sort of put them on the world stage? Yeah. So yes, and you can train that, but I think over time we actually, as a society, need to work on this cultural shift, which I think one point will be like is the role model thing, which we mentioned. Yeah, is sort of showing and also appreciating that as a society. Yeah, if entrepreneurs are successful and disrupt. Yeah, for the short term, I think it's also important to pair up. So not to force. I try when I do deep tech investments not to force an amazing scientist into something he's not. Yeah. So because that normally doesn't work, I try to sort of polish them and work with them and sort of, but also sometimes it's better to say you need a co-founder. You are the amazing scientist. Let's find somebody who is representing the sort of, let's call it commercial side or the fundraising or whatever. And so push more that it sort of must, a founding team must not be a one-man show. And then, yeah, so pair more people together, maybe scientists with people who've done already successfully companies whatsoever.
Really clear. I think to jump on that, I'd like probably Nigel to start on this comment. What's your takeaway?
So I'm going to take a counter view, maybe disagree with some of the comments that have been said. I think there's a misunderstanding. There's a sort of simplification that people make, where they look at the idea that research somehow enables innovation that drives big companies, and that there's somehow this linear process that happens. I don't think there is a linear process. I think research is about building much deeper knowledge and understanding around a particular area. I think innovation is around solving problems for consumers or for businesses. That's what people buy. People buy products that solve problems for them, and one doesn't necessarily create the other. And the perfect example, you go back to the Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville. They created aeroplanes, and they thought that was going to solve some problems. They didn't really know anything about aeronautics. Aeronautics didn't really exist as a science when they created the airplane, and it created the whole science of aeronautics, where then researchers went off to understand aeronautics and learn how to build better airplanes. And so it's not linear. It sort of interacts. Often innovation will drive research. Sometimes research will enable innovation. And we've got to recognize that fact. And it's really hard for governments, because they feel like they want to invest in research and they want to invest in all this knowledge creation, and somehow that's going to create innovation. It's going to somehow create great economic outcomes, and there isn't, sometimes actually finding that correlation is quite difficult. So I think what happens here is more kind of what Christian was referring to, is research will happen. A researcher will come together with somebody who's an innovator, an entrepreneur. The two together will create some breakthrough that solves some business problem, and a really interesting business will result from that. But it's almost about, you've got to encourage the research and develop the research to gain that really clear, deep understanding around research areas, or the ability even to learn and understand how to drive that deep knowledge. And we've got to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship as well. It's not necessarily in the same person. It might be in different people. I think the thing that I see different between the US, having spent quite a lot of time there, and what we see in Europe, is this concept of product management. If you think about a skill that is really lacking in Europe, it's this concept of product management. People who can understand the voice of the customer and can translate that into the engineering side or the research side to really help the researchers and engineers understand what the problem is that the customers have, the real problem, not just what they say they want, but the underlying problem that can be solved. and can go off and create a solution to that. You know, the Apple was mentioned earlier. You know, Apple's a great example. Apple didn't really do a lot of customer research. They had really clear ideas about what would solve problems for customers, and they brought out innovative products that went beyond what people were expecting. So I think kind of mixed up within that, it's this idea that somehow research and innovation are separate things, and you've got to find a point at which they come together. And that's the sort of symbiosis you want to try and encourage. And we've got to try and encourage the full suite of capabilities, you know, research, engineers, product management, business people, entrepreneurs, who are going to come together, you know, to form these businesses. We always use the term in GraphCore, you know, company. The word company, it comes from Latin. You know, it's com and panis. We think of com as communication. It actually means together. Panis is bread. A company is just a group of people who come together to solve a problem. You know, the company literally means coming together and sharing bread. A company is a group of people who come together and solve some underlying problem, have a mission. And I think that's what we've somehow got to encourage more, is this grouping of people with different skills coming together.
Thank you, Nigel. I think this is a really good point. Just for the speaker, maybe if we could keep it to 2 minutes like time frame, just to give the room to the crowd, because there's already questions that have been asked, and I'd love to hear from our participants today as well. But good point. Product management skill. I think it's super interesting. How do you see this point? Maybe Antoine, because it's hard to launch like an endeavor like insects. And what's your takeaway on this first question? Okay, Antoine, so you jumped to get our stage. Sorry.
If I may, Christophe, can I make maybe a quick comment? I think we actually do agree, Nigel, about the fact that it's two worlds that need to meet themselves, and maybe it allows us to jump on the other discussion point about building connection between ecosystems that was suggested by the community, by including entrepreneurs and VC profiles and university bodies. So I guess this is one way of making the connection. I would just say that I agree with you to the point that I would say let's leave science produce the science, right? And so there, I'm not sure we do need a strong interaction with VCs and entrepreneurs, but when this science exists, when it is there, then there is a transition to be made, and there you need to absolutely make the connection, because it's not going to be made by us, by research organizations. We need this connection then with people who actually did it, know it, and know how to do that. And so there are two parts, I would say. The research that needs to be made just for the progress of the knowledge, and this is what researchers do on an everyday basis. And then there is a part of their work which is going to be to get connected to the social and economical world in order to make this transition. And this is where the comment I made, that they need to get this entrepreneur mindsets just to be able to understand the need to talk to those people and to have an actual fruitful conversation.
Yes, thank you, Johanna. Antoine, do you want to jump quickly before the connection is closing again? So one quick question, Antoine, like to frame maybe this point and then move on the next one. Beyond the dedicated entrepreneurship track, how can we make sure that science programs are oriented toward application market if needed? And maybe what did you miss from the insect experience on this environment? All right, I'm turning the question to Jan, if you heard me, because Antoine seems not to hear. So Jan, how can we make sure that science programs are oriented toward application markets if needed? And how do you felt with quantum computing? Because this is typically a field where there is decades of research before spilling into markets.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great, it works. So this is a good question, and I think one thing that we should keep in mind is when answering this how to turn scientific excellence into technology is keeping the focus. because this also answers a little bit your question, is that usually scientists, they think very broad about concepts and do things work in general or not. But then if we want to drive innovation out of it, I think it should be very, very focused. And the focus should exactly be on this product management and how to bring it into the market. And I think this is something that we should also keep in mind when designing these programs. How do we actually create the incentives for the scientific community to build something in a very focused way that works and that creates value? This is one thing. And then the other thing that at least I learned when turning from science into the entrepreneurship is this system thinking. So really think about the system as a whole that you're building. And I think this is very important, because usually scientists, they focus on their particular problem, but then they don't really think about, hey, does it actually fit into the big picture? And how do the interfaces work together, and are there standards and all of this? And I think this is also something that we could consider when discussing how we can shape from the outside, maybe through policies or so, the generation of innovation and commercializing it.
Thanks. And with this answer, we'll transfer the stage to Ashok, who managed to join us for the second topic. Welcome, Ashok.
So let me try again. So thanks a lot for having me. We're now moving to the second topic, namely adapting venture capital models to deep tech investment. As you all know, we witnessed in Europe today a lack of knowledge and appetite for complex technologies and their financing. And what this session is about is to adapt the VC model to deep tech investments. So we've agreed on two consensus points. I think one of them is debatable, at least, namely how to develop dedicated funds with longer lifetime, larger funding and specific support. For example, by limited partnerships or general partnerships. And the second consensus point was on developing state support as an anchor. We have two discussion points, namely how to attract private co-investment on top of the state investment we've just mentioned. For example, and I think that's debatable, by providing asymmetric returns to deep tech investments. And the second discussion point is about a kind of credit assessment body that would allow investors to better assess technology risks. We have these kind of bodies around the world. For example, in Korea, we have a technology rating system. And the question is whether this would be a good idea for Europe as well. So yeah, now we move to the feedbacks from first of all, Christian, if you're there, please.
No, in general, my main point is always a little bit sort of not critical, but like poking the startup scene as well. Like, really, yes, we need more capital, always, yeah. But in generally, even in Europe, I think when there is an amazing company and an amazing idea with a great team, then there is money. So it's not just putting more money on something and then the basis is not there. So it's sort of, at least it's developing both what we had on the slide before, sort of the quality of startups at the same time than creating more funds. So I had actually not seen, you can say this is a bias because obviously I haven't seen the ones who failed and would have deserved it. But in general, I don't have the feeling that that's a short version, that companies who deserve to get money in Europe do not get money, because they might get it then from the US, and that's already a critical point. So, but that's another discussion if we want so critical deep tech startups to be financed, let's call it onshore. Yeah, but money is there, more money always better. It has to go hand in hand with the quality of the business. Yeah, and at the same time, because we also talk here about develop public-private co-investments, whatever. Yeah, the big issue I see there. Again, it's great if the government wants to put in more money. Yeah, but there are easier things to do first. Yeah, for example, I'm investing a lot in the space tech industry, which is, I think, one of the few industries we have to be actually on top of our game, because that also has a national, and European interest. Yeah, we can't be dependent on space tech capabilities in the US. Yeah, but there, if push comes to shove, is again what I said at the very beginning. Politicians support the incumbents, especially, by the way, in France and Germany. So we don't even need more money. We just need fair terms, in competition for these startups.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks a lot. So before I move to Johanna, I would like to remind you of the polling and of the Q&A. So Johanna, the stage is yours. So do you agree with the consensus points? And what do you think about ideas, lack of ideas and lack of funding in Europe?
Well, yeah, I do agree with the consensus points. I think though there's one part in the discussion point that has not been mentioned, and I would just like to add this point as a feedback on our experience on really early stage deep tech startups. But this is my experience, and I'd love to hear about later stage, I would say, startups. What we expect as well from VC is not just investments. We need them to be a little bit hands-on our projects, because they're extremely difficult to build. Because at the beginning, it's not just about funding; it's about having also around the founders qualified people that are going to help them actually with their advice, with the network, with the support of all kinds. So I see more and more the VC ecosystem adapting to this need, being more of an hybrid between a startup studio and a VC. And I think this is important, should be encouraged. It's an actual need that I'm expressing there when it comes to early stage deep tech startups. And I'm not sure how this could be encouraged through, I don't know, governmental actions or just through communication of those needs. But it is a very specific need that we have, and I'm not sure it's very well addressed so far.
If I can add one thing, if I would add one thing which I forgot, is like, it's what is really missing in Europe is a functional exit market, meaning a stock market which appreciates deep tech companies. Because once you have a functional exit market, so once people can really make money and monetize also their success, investors, that automatically leads to way more investments in earlier stages. And at the moment, the fact is you can't IPO, I mean you can, but like you don't want to IPO a biotech company in Europe. There is zero pots of money, zero onshore demand. So they all go to the US. The same, by the way, for a lot of other, from space tech to whatever. Or they are sold. But in both things, if a company, a European company, you can say it stays a European company, it's just listed in the US. But my theory is once you list it in the US, you gradually will move there, whatever that means, like with work, like parts of your company, like knowledge, whatever. And the same, obviously, if you sold to a non-European entity. So we definitely, what is even more, again, I don't want to reject more money from the government, but like, what is even more needed are functioning IPO exit stock markets. And that translates actually again in the cultural problem, because why are our equity markets in Europe dysfunctional? Because we don't have a capital markets culture, because ultimately you need retail to invest, you need insurances to invest. And if you look at retail insurances, they all buy cash and bonds, which by the way, over the next 10 years will kill them, because money will get inflated away. So we're gonna have, actually that's a sad thing, like on a macro basis, we already,
okay, so that was an excellent point on exit. So let's pass the stage to Antoine, and then I would like to hear Nigel's opinion about state support. As Europeans, we rely a lot on the state, so I'm not sure this is a consensus point. So Antoine first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ashok. I hope you hear me. I might have just 2 minutes. My point is, sorry,
so I would like to ask you about the state support topic. So do we really need a state as an anchor investor, and the asymmetric return topic? So in Europe, we always ask for the state government support. Is that really the key point that will bring European startups to the top?
It's a critical point, but not the only one. I think we also need in the VC staff, very experienced and skilled people in the segments, in the sectors. If you don't have the analysts in the team, in VCs, in private equity, and in later stage, also public markets, you will not have the educated people that can understand all the technologies and the time of developments, which is totally different from the software industry. So it's not only a question of finance, of course, it's a question of talents on the entrepreneur side, back to the first question, and also on the investor side. If we don't have the culture and skills, you won't create from scratch just with financing this kind of new deep tech giant in Europe.
Thanks a lot, Antoine. Final polling reminder, by the way, and Q&A reminder before I pass the stage on to Nigel, please. State support, asymmetric investment, and credit assessment body. Please start comments on those.
I sort of agree with some of the comments that have been made so far. We need VCs who understand the space and can help companies. I think there is money at the early seed and A stages. I think there's a funding gap between companies that have technology but don't yet have customers, and that's perhaps where the state can support and help to create some of those larger funds. Often you find British Business Bank, for example, is supporting seed stage VCs, but they're not supporting the larger check size VCs. And the reason that a lot of European businesses end up being sold, not going through to completion, I sort of agree with Christian, we need the public market support, but actually it's that gap in the middle, which is really the issue. And the companies end up selling because they can't get that middle stage funding to really grow and scale their businesses from a product concept into real revenue, profit generating businesses. And I think that is a state where the state can step in and support, maybe it's sovereign wealth funds that are supporting VCs, maybe it's central business banks that are supporting VCs to be able to make informed decisions and write larger checks to support deep tech companies across that chasm from technology to real revenue generating, profit generating business. And too often what happens in Europe is those businesses end up getting snapped up and sold to American or Asian companies, and we lose the skills and we lose the value creation that can come from those businesses. I don't care about the asymmetric returns. Let's have sovereign wealth put money into VCs and let them write big checks, and let's make that money flow back to governments. That's fine.
Thank you very much.
I know we're short in time, but then let's do a sovereign wealth fund. I totally agree. But as it's thing now, you don't want to have the government as a shareholder, because you end up in government bureaucracy. So if government money means we do it, I just want to point that out because I think a lot of people.
It needs to be a fund of fund. It needs to be
a professional player. With professional short timelines, super quick, not like a 1 year process.
And investing in funds rather than trying to direct invest and support industrial strategy, which never works, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nigel and Christian. This is a very, very important point, I think. So we now have a question from the audience, namely from Mathieu Repelin from Airbus Ventures, and he asks how to transfer license IP from research and academia to startups without killing the startup before it is even created and still provide fair return to research and academia. Who would like to jump on stage regarding the fair return to research and academia? Nigel, please, you go first.
It's about building a big cake. Too often what happens is people want a big share and they're happy that the cake is quite small and they take their big share of a small cake. What actually needs to happen is academia needs to take a small share and build a really big cake, and they'll actually make a lot more money. Just as an example, I joined a startup company back at the end of the 1980s. We went public. We did a 256x in the public market. That's where real money gets created. And that's how academia can make the money. It's not on starting something and getting it sold for a few million. It's starting something that grows to 20 billion.
And is there a difference? You said you spent some time in the US. Is there a difference between the American approach of remunerating research and academia to the European approach?
Well, you take somebody like Sequoia. All of Sequoia's early stage funds, they pride themselves on the fact that that is all not for profit. So it's foundations, it's academia, not-profit organizations that are investing in those early Sequoia funds, and they're generating lots of return for those. But they're building big cakes that generate, even if you've got small shareholding, you earn a lot because the cake is very big. We don't create the big cakes.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we have one more question, namely, should we develop a public procurement at European level to give the best scale-ups a chance to become European champions? Once again, a very Euro-centric question. So who would like to comment on that? Jan, please.
Yes, I can comment on this, because this is something that we are as a company are also experiencing. And I think it also touches upon the question whether governments should start investing. I think, at least in my opinion, the role of the government is to provide the talent, so educate, provide the infrastructures so that things can be done, and then maybe take the early risk out of the market. And maybe this is this last point, that in generally, I think it is okay if there are public procurements for solutions which are still too risky and too early to be adopted by industry. And I think this is something, instead of investing into the companies, they could just buy from them the systems, and in this way take the early risk out of it. And also it has a nice side effect for the startups, of course, because they generate revenue. Of course, it's revenue from the government. It's maybe not yet what the VCs want to see, but still it helps these deep tech startups survive the long road until they really have the commercial traction. So I think this public procurement is a nice tool, actually, instead of direct investments. Just buy from them and they will be happy.
Okay, thank you. I'm a little bit skeptical. So Johanna is nodding. So maybe you want to comment next, Johanna.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the, it can be for sure a mix together, but I think we've seen a difference between the US and Europe on this point. When the state funds in terms of subventions, to make the project progress, the state can also say, okay, I'm funding your development, and it's actually a buyout in advance, meaning I'm actually buying your products if they become real in 5 to 10 years. And this is just about filling the need for cash, and in a way that might be actually better economically speaking for the state than just handing out subventions. So why not?
Okay, thanks a lot. We have one more question, namely, how can we help investors find the right experts to understand and assess deep tech business models? And I think that question is related to one of the discussion points we raised, namely funding a public body that could assess technology. Once again, I think this is a very debatable point. So I would like to ask Nigel for his opinion.
I think we sort of covered this. I don't think state and government should be directly investing in deep tech. I think what they need to do is to invest in funds that invest in deep tech, and those funds will put in place the experts and the advice that is needed to understand and discern which are the technologies that can grow, and to make those correct investment decisions. But what the state can do is provide a piece of capital that can support those investment decisions and allow those funds to be much longer term in their thinking, and to support companies to build larger scale. So that, I think that's the way you address it. I think the idea that states build up bodies that have experts, it's very problematic, because inevitably what's going to happen is you're going to have companies in that group that fail. And what will happen is the politicians will all get beaten up on the company that failed. Oh, you put my state money into this thing and it didn't work. And they'll never focus in on the ones that succeed, or very unlikely to focus in on the ones that succeed. So I think it's very problematic.
Thanks a lot, Nigel. I fully agree. Maybe somebody else disagrees, Antoine, maybe. So Nigel's point in a nutshell is we need state support, but only indirectly through funding the funding funds and not funding deep tech directly. So Antoine, maybe you have a different opinion on this.
No, I quite agree with Nigel said. Indirect investment with professional team is good, and the question was how to find these professional teams for VCs and private equities. There's experts. They could be recruited in academia, in the experts in the field, in big corporates. I think you were speaking about quantum computing. The companies like Atos in France, they have experts. They could be maybe working with universities and with VCs on this.
Thank you very much, Antoine. So let me wrap up. So we've learned in our discussion that we do need the government and state funding, but I think we've agreed that state funding only makes sense if it's done indirectly through VC funds and not directly. That's point one. Point two, we've learned that exit is a very important point. We need to think more about exit opportunities in Europe and how to deal with that. And third, we have, I think, agreed on the fact that asymmetric returns are not the key topic here. So there could be asymmetric returns, but that's not the issue that really leads to Europe being behind the US. Thank you very much. I would like to pass on the stage to Christophe with a third key topic, namely how to address Europe's key challenges with the help of deep tech. Please, Christophe.
Thanks, Ashok, and thanks for this those great inputs. I would like to remind participants to not be shy and chat on the different topics and use the polls to give us your feedbacks on the most important recommendations. So now let's move to this third question of our discussion today, and it's a massive question. When discussing with Johanna and Christian to prepare the session, we're all agreeing that the challenge are going to be tremendous. We said there's already maybe 4 times more investment in the US than in deep tech today in Europe, but that's not it. There's challenges and there's boldness and ambition to tackle those challenges. And to do so, clearly, we have already existing instruments that have been set up. So the European Innovation Council is the most ambitious program from Europe so far, which will deliver $10 billion until 2027 to help finance Pathfinder, let's say early stage startups to find a market, transition to address it really efficiently, and accelerator to take shares really with the mindset of an investor along investors playing along well at the table of investment and with the right speed to help leverage this money. So it's actually not 10 billion, it's more 40, 50, 70 that we can leverage to motivate the private investment fund. The second topic that can be of help is that we're entering a really ecosystem approach to structure each other around the biggest challenges. So this will probably help us tackle those big challenges together. And to give them a glimpse of what challenge we're talking about, I would like to go to the next slide to help you, let's say, have in mind what are already challenges that the deep tech are addressing in our global competition. It's more than 97% of deep tech that already answer to one or more of the SDN Sustainable Development Goal. We see that obviously reinvent here or current infrastructure and innovation is going to be really important as we have tremendous, for example, climate goals, which recently have been reframed to be 2 times more what we already planned before 2030, this morning only. So there's a climate changes that are going to be really important. There's sovereign topics like healthcare, the data and cloud, cloud, as Johanna was mentioning, and there's then the next industries. If we want to be competing in 2030, in a decade, those industries are being prepared now. So to move on the three questions, I'd like to address the crowd and our speakers first. With the other slide, according to you, what are Europe's big challenges that deep tech can and should help solve? And I'd like to invite Johanna on this one.
Well, if you pick on that list of topic, it's difficult to actually make a pick, right? They will all need to be addressed, and they're all addressed right now by research. The question is, what is going to be the transition that we're going to be able to make through innovation? I think right now, and you've mentioned it, Europe has taken the challenge, really, especially by creating the EIC, because like a couple of years ago, Europe was well known for its policy on research funding. The research funding of Europe is one of the most attractive, for sure. And now with the creation of the EIC, they're actually tackling the funding of the next steps. The thing is, we're going to have to have a look at how efficient the EIC is. It is for sure answering a need, a crucial need. One of the suggestions of the community is to make it faster, stronger. I would emphasize on faster. And this is maybe joining the discussion that we had previously on the need to have professional investors and the need to professionalize the teams around investment. The EIC is going to be a great tool if they reach the level of how to say, a delay and of reactiveness of the professional investors. And this is something we absolutely need to make it a tool at the height of the challenges that we're facing.
Well, Christian, do you want to jump on this one?
Well, first of all, yeah, so it's my favorite topic because I'm actually my sort of theme in investing of my capital is that I want to invest in the companies which build the world I want to live in. So every single investment is doing something which excites me and is building the future. So just to add to the list we have well-being on it, but my main focus is that I think aging sucks, dying even more. I hope someone, I'm actually very confident, the question is it's in my lifetime, but that definitely we were going to push life expectancy with the help of deep tech, which includes biotech, but also other stuff, because we might want to change parts of our body anyway, but going to push that. So this is my favorite topic. The only thing I want to mention, which worries me a bit, is that even if we pushing, or even if we're solving problems like climate change, or let's say all the problems I think we agreed should be solved on the list. But my also experience is that we get a little bit like sort of not lost, but like we all love what we're doing in deep tech, but it frightens a big part of the population. And I think we also have to think about if the world we're building, this is nothing now to do with venture, but mentioning it because it's one thing which I think a lot about, is the world we're building, with especially deep tech innovation, biotech innovation, whatever, are people, the majority of people, really comfortable living in that world? Or do we need to put way more focus on taking sort of the ordinary people with us on that journey into the future, or do we lose them? And I think a lot of things we see in politics at the moment, radicalization, people going onto the fringes, whatever, we can always say, oh, this is a sign of our time. But I think the deeper thing is that a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with the world we're building. So that's sort of the flip side. We want to solve the problems, but we need to be careful that we don't scare people away with too much futurism.
And I'm going to open this question to other speaker in a minute, but I'm going to add a new question as well, like how to make those instruments align, foster, help prioritize those solutions. So as a reminder, the EIC, it's exactly 13.5 billion over 2021 to 2007. There is at the Pathfinder transition and accelerator stage the possibility to make direct equity, quasi-equity investment between 0.5 to 15 million. And there's going to be more programs around innovation ecosystems, coaching to link those stakeholders together. And I would love to hear both like your priorities from your side. Maybe Jan first, and then Antoine and Nigel. And if you have any practical recommendation to turn this instrument into an even more efficient framework for us to grow the next tech giant in Europe.
But I think generally deep tech, usually means being very disruptive, and often this also means that it's not solving a single problem on this list. So if you take quantum computing as an example, right, if you make it work, many of these topics, they probably benefit from it. So I don't know if it's the right question to say kind of focus quantum on one of those, but how can we focus to make it work first? And I think then the benefits will come. I wanted to also kind of in the spirit of Christian, talk a little bit about this question: do we actually here live in our own bubble, and how do we make sure that other people on the street understand well enough what we are talking about and are not kind of scared or think this is black magic? This is one thing. And the other thing also is that I think we are all here very much like-minded, that we want to use the technology to make the world a better place. And this is also what drives our company. But as we know, many of these technologies, they can also be used in different ways, right? And the question is, how do we as a society create a world where then we are sure that if we are building up the technology here, we only use it in this right way, and we don't kind of create a situation where it backfires at some point at us. And I think these are also questions that should be addressed, because we can always put there this nice list of problems to be solved, but then there's also this other list of how this technology can create trouble actually for us in the future as well.
Nigel?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about, we always talk about creating these new industries, which maybe will happen, but we've also got some great industries already in Europe. Transportation, both cars and aeroplanes. We've got fantastic chemical industry. We've got amazing drug discovery. So how can deep tech support some of these existing businesses and feed off some of the skills that already exist within those? Because as fast as we might create something new, if we destroy what we already have, or don't create the innovation that's going to allow our car industry in Europe to move to the next generation of clean cars and clean transportation and intelligent transportation, we're going to lose much, much more than we'll ever replace with something new. So we also need to look at that. So I think looking at your list, looking at those big themes, I think is important. But we also need to think about it in terms of feeding off the skills and the capabilities that we already have in Europe, and think about, how can we apply quantum or AI in our case to help build, this intelligent transportation, for example, or help us to understand protein folding so we can do better drug discovery. There's lots of ways in which this deep tech can be applied to current problems that really exist here in Europe and help us to grow what is already, super strength in Europe.
No, okay, this is clear. Maybe while Anton is joining us again, one question from Carolina. How would you see the overall deep tech strategy for Europe? Should specific countries focus just on chosen sectors like photonics, food tech, etc., or invest in many different areas? And maybe if you have any gut feeling, what should be priorities? Should there be any?
I think you do, but maybe I can chime in. I think it needs to be thematic. The more specific countries or governments become, or institutions become in saying, it needs to be photonics or something, the more difficult it is. I think what it needs to be is setting large themes, thematic, maybe moonshots. DARPA is a good example, perhaps, from that perspective in the US. So how do we create themes that people can then get behind and be supported to help support directly or indirectly? I think that's a much better way of doing it than being very specific.
Antoine, do you want to jump in to answer that question? Not sure you read me. Anyway, Jan, maybe you want to follow on the previous question and this one from Katrina?
Yes, well, I think usually also different countries already have kind of a profile. Some are stronger in photonics, some are stronger in other fields. And I think it makes sense also to consider this because we don't have to reinvent the wheel in each country over and over again. But here we can really use this European strength and say, okay, maybe you're better at this one and we are better at that one. And then we kind of share a little bit the responsibilities. And usually, I guess this is also what is happening if you, for example, consider these European calls or so. They already know then where is the stuff kind of at the moment really being developed, and then they build on this. But of course, this also has this kind of drawback that maybe we are losing then some countries completely or so. So I think this is also something we keep in mind. How can we make sure that the whole of Europe kind of as a whole rises on the technology level, and we don't do all the things always in the same few countries, but really keep this whole European aspect also alive.
I'm going to invite Ashok to open up the discussion on this one, if you want to, Ashok.
Yes, so the question to the audience is, so we've learned a lot now about how to adapt the VC model with various alternatives. We've discussed now with the lead of Christophe how to address the key challenges of deep tech. And now the question is, have we missed anything? Is there any big important point that we have not addressed that would help bring European deep tech companies to the top? Nigel has made a good point, namely we can focus on industries where we're already strong in. Are there any other points we could address here? Points that we've really not addressed so far?
Well, is it to us or to the audience?
Oh, to you guys, but we can also open up to the audience. So Christian, maybe you want to comment first, and then we'll see what comes.
No, I think by the way we had everything, because if we wouldn't have anything, we would have been worse prepared. Actually, I think all what was in my mind we touched. Like execution is the key. I always tell that politician, but like we know where to go, the direction at least.
Okay, so anybody from the audience who disagrees? Have we covered everything?
Maybe while we're waiting, Ashok, I think one of the things I would say is, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? We need to build. We need outcomes that then create bigger outcomes that create bigger outcomes. That's how this evolves. People who build successful companies go on to form funds that are then well informed and help other businesses to grow. It's how do we create those cultures? I've seen a massive change over the last 10 years in Europe, in terms of funding mentality, people's approach. The survey at the beginning, 44% of people in universities think entrepreneur is an outcome. That would never have happened, 15 years ago. So I think we've made massive progress, and it's a case of how do we sort of start the process, build on the successes we've got, and ramp it up as fast as we can.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nigel. So Rome was not built in a day, but what can we do to foster really disruptive innovation, bold innovation? So building Rome in several years is one thing. The other thing is to really set the environment for disruptive deep tech.
I think one very high level, which is also then a thank you to Philippe, because nobody has said that yet. We should, to setting that up. I think we can all be very critical always, and I have a lot of things which I'm critical with politics. But ultimately, by the way, but I think two positive. First of all, we're sitting here, so this is a very good initiative. And second, I think the easiest thing politics can do, because it doesn't cost anything, it's not really bureaucratic if the guy on the top or the woman on the top wants it, is the signaling effect. And I think that's the best thing of this initiative, is that if somebody like President Macron says startups are important, but you just need to do it then over and over again, then you slowly start sort of pivoting society. Because at the end, we're an archaic society. People always look to the top. And if the leader of the pack says that's the way to go now, and that is good, and I appreciate that, very, very high level, yeah, this can actually have the biggest impact, yeah, because that is actually what is then, if you have a really good leader who's pushing a theme like that, then you start changing the culture and how society views it. And it's a good example if then whatever 40% of the young people want to do a startup, which most likely the number in Europe would have been way lower 10 years ago. Yeah, so I think, but it shouldn't then stop with this initiative, but yeah, so if this daily appreciation of entrepreneurs, what they're building, how hard that can be in their life, yeah, and celebrating the successes to build up role models and make it desirable.
Thank you very much, Christian. So we have one more question from the audience, namely from Andre Lozecru-Pietri from Joint European Disruptive Initiative. So his question is, did we put too much emphasis on state or EU money? Can we really hope to be disruptive with the help of the state? Or are there other players, namely civil society, foundations, philanthropists, who could help really create bold innovation in Europe? Does anybody want to comment on that question? How to raise other forms of money in Europe as compared, let's say, to the US, where we have big private investments, big investments by foundations, etc.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true that foundations and whatever, like maybe I understand the question, but I think you need big pots of money because deep tech needs a lot of money. Yeah. So, and ultimately, I believe you just get that from a capitalistic system. So you need to make a lot of money for people and they give you more money. And I think it was the right thing what Nigel and all of the others said, like, the state should ideally stay out of picking individual companies because the state is famously bad in that. Yeah, but he should give it to people who are famously good for that. Yeah, aka investing in funds. And to repeat, because I think this is which annoys me always in the space tech part, just give them mandates on an equal basis to or business to existing companies, and don't at the end. And I've seen that too much. Yeah, that at the end, product is better from a startup. The state mandate goes to an incumbent just because he has a better lobbying department, and that needs to stop. It's actually so simple. We don't need to expect too much from the state. We just need to expect the normal things. Then we've already done a lot.
I think there is.
Thanks a lot, Christian. Nigel, please.
I think there are some mechanical things, and I think Christian mentioned this. You know, you take investment from insurance, for example, where there are state rules that require a certain amount of the fund to be liquid, that restricts how much they can invest into venture, for example, or deep tech. So there are certain mechanical things I think states can look at to encourage some of these sources of investments into funds. But actually, in terms of foundations, Wellcome Trust, for example, is one of the largest investors into VC funds. So I think foundations and these trusts already are investing in VC because they see the long-term capital creation that it does support. And I don't see why we should have all of these other restrictions. This idea that investment money from insurance, for example, is somehow unsafe if it goes into venture investment. I think it can be treated as an asset class that can generate very strong returns.
Yeah, and just adding, it's exactly that signaling by the state telling insurance companies they can't put in money in venture funds. They signal it's not safe. Truth is, cash and bonds are not safe. They were depreciated over the last 10, 20 years like nothing else. The insurance companies would flourish if for the last 20 years they would have been in equities and venture. Yeah, so best case would be the state deregulates and doesn't say anything. Yeah, you need some regulation in insurances and banks, but adjust those regulations to the times we live in. Yeah, and then you have the double effect. You unlock the money of the insurance industry, which especially in Europe is way more important than America because we don't have retail whatever yet. And then additionally, it signals also to the normal investor, oh, if it's good for insurances and banks and whatever, it's also good for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Christian. We have one final question by Editra from the European Commission. She asked whether there is a need to enable more experimentation by policymakers now. And I would like to share that question with you. One comment from my side. So the question rephrased would be something like, are we putting, if we invest into bold innovation, all our eggs into one basket, or are there ways of diversifying in a better way?
I think one of the things I always struggle with is this idea of breadcrumbs, as I call it. Often what you see is people sprinkle things too loosely in lots of different places, and it never has any effect. So sometimes you do need to make big, bold moves, but maybe the way to do that is, as we've talked about, through fund-of-fund type investments, where you can put big amounts of capital to work, and then it's supported with other sources of capital and creates a big impact. I completely agree with Christian as well. It's about signaling, saying this is the right thing to do. Having our political leaders talking about these moonshots, talking about entrepreneurship, talking about deep tech. I absolutely agree that that's a big part of it. And the risk is that you pick one of these big things and it doesn't work out, and then it just becomes a block for the next 10 years of any support and help being put forward.
Thanks a lot, Nigel. We'll now move to the wrap-up part and the polling results. So first of all, thank you to everybody in the audience, and thanks a lot for asking all these very interesting questions. I think we agreed that even some of the consensus points were questions again, but on some of them we did agree, namely the curricula, the state support for a very good environment. Then on financing, I think we found that there is a big role for the government, but not so much for direct financing, but more for indirect financing. We've also discussed questions like asymmetric returns, which are, I think, less important than we previously thought. We've learned a lot about scientific excellence, which is better than many expected, I think, in Europe, and that we could focus on those industries where we are already excellent. We've mentioned some of them, transportation, for example. And now I'm really curious to see what the audience thinks about our three key topics, namely scientific excellence and breakthrough, deep tech financing, and the key challenges, how to solve them in a competitive environment. So Christoph, please summarize the polling results.
Thanks a lot. We're going to see them on screen in a second. Curious as well to discover with you the results. Didn't have the final figures yet. All right. So you're 66% to believe that we could strengthen connection between ecosystem with entrepreneurs, VC profile, and university bodies, vice versa. We have a diverse range of those models: fully public, public-private, private, like probably the public-private model seems to be the one preferred by the community so far. On the second point, adapt the VC model to the tech investment. Obviously, we need a more patient capital and larger fund with a specific support. And I'm confident that the EIC is a first great bold step forward, leveraging public and private capital together. One of our members was saying, as a deep tech upcoming scale up, we're not fearing to be short on round C, D, E capital, because we'll have the North America and Middle East funds. But then it's a question altogether on which, let's say, topics of sovereignty we're going to be able to prioritize together with more, let's say, alignment to keep sovereignty on the technologies that matters. And the third topic, key challenge for Europe to address with the help of deep tech. So obviously, we need to transform those existing industries because we're building now for them the resilience that we need for our next decade. And our choice today influence how resilient we're going to be in this next decade. And climate action. Actually, some members in the crowd were super extreme as to say there should always be climate environment criteria nowadays and investment criteria for everything that we should fund within Europe. So I believe with the Green Deal, we have an amazing opportunity to create a European way of innovating on climate, on environment, that we have all the strengths that we need. And to close our session, I'm going to invite Johanna, Christian, to say their last few words before we wrap up with Philippe. Johanna, Christian.
Yeah, well, I think this has been a really great talk, and I'm actually happy to see the results of the poll. I think they sum up pretty much the discussion on where we should focus really, and urgently. I look forward to the next discussions to maybe see what kind of suggestion can be made in a more concrete way, because yeah, for sure now the key is execution, as Christian said. So I think yeah, for sure now we need to see how we can make suggestions to execute properly some solutions that answer the two challenges that made the biggest score in the polls, and I agree with that.
Perfect, Christian.
Look, I loved it. It was great. I think all is said. Maybe the only point which just came, just to reiterate, because I think this was, again, would be a big but easy thing, not easy, but like big thing which maybe everybody would love in Europe. Create, Philippe, take France as a leader, create a sovereign wealth fund on a European level. Because if you do a national thing, then it's again competing. But like on a European level, interest rates are at 0. So you could lend $1 trillion, literally $1 trillion, and invest it for 0. And the gains, which hopefully inevitably would come, would be for every European country, so everybody supports it. So a large European, professionally managed though, not politically managed, professionally managed sovereign wealth fund, I think would help not just deep tech, would help the whole startup ecosystem, and at the same time actually sort of would be an important step for European integration, because meaning I know the Germans are against it, I'm for it, I'm not speaking for the German government, but like lending money on a European level, and sort of bringing Europe by this closer together, by making money together. Nothing is more amazing. I made my best friends with making money together. That's really fun. So you can also get that done on a state level.
Thank you so much, Christian. Thanks to our participants, members joining us today. And without further ado, Philippe, the floor is yours for the conclusion remarks.
Thank you. Thank you all. Really, thanks to our two co-chairs, Johanna, Christian, and of course to our speakers, Nigel, Jan, Antoine. It was a lovely debate. So I will remind the quote, "Rome was not built in a day," from Nigel, and also execution is key, from Christian. So about execution, we'll come back to you by mid-May to share with you the Scale Up Europe draft report, so that you can share your feedback, and that the community can align on a few final set of concrete recommendations. And also, let's not forget that we'll all meet mid-June to publish this final report on the manifesto, and to present it to President Emmanuel Macron at Vivatech. So we'll, of course, give you all the details in due time, and stay tuned.